The courtroom was dead silent when the judge opened that envelope. My daughter-in-law Victoria sat 3 rows ahead of me, her designer handbag clutched tight, her Miami tan still glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights. She had just accused me of kidnapping my own grandchildren. But as the judge's face changed, as his eyebrows raised and his mouth formed that perfect O of shock, Victoria's confident smile began to crack. She had no idea what was coming. Can you imagine being called a kidnapper by the same person who abandoned her children on your doorstep? What would you do if someone tried to destroy you after you sacrificed everything to protect the innocent? I sat there in my simple navy dress, watching her world crumble, knowing that what I was about to reveal would change everything forever. The envelope contained more than just evidence. It contained justice. My name is Edith Chamberlain. I am 62 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was enjoying a quiet retirement after 35 years as a family court mediator. I thought my days of dealing with custody battles and broken families were behind me. I was wrong. Sometimes life calls you back to fight the most important battle of your life, and sometimes that battle is for your own family. It started on a Tuesday morning in March. I was tending to my rose garden when Victoria's car pulled into my driveway. She stepped out wearing a flowing white sundress and oversized sunglasses, looking like she was ready for a magazine photo shoot rather than a visit to her mother-in-law. My son Michael had been deployed overseas for 6 months, serving his 3rd tour in Afghanistan, and Victoria had been struggling, or so I thought. "Edith, honey," she called out, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "I need to ask you the biggest favor." Behind her in the car, I could see my grandchildren. Emma, 8 years old with her father's serious dark eyes, and little Jake, only 5, pressing his face against the window. They looked tired, confused. Emma was clutching her worn stuffed rabbit, the one I had given her when she was 3. "What kind of favor, Victoria?" I asked, setting down my gardening gloves and walking toward the car. "Well, you know how hard it's been since Michael left. I'm drowning, you know? The kids are so much work, and I haven't had a moment to myself in months." She paused, removing her sunglasses to reveal perfectly applied makeup, not the face of a woman who was drowning. "My friend Stephanie invited me to Miami for just a few weeks. A little break to recharge, you understand. I thought maybe what, Victoria? Maybe Emma and Jake could stay with you? Just for a little while. 2 weeks tops. They love their grandma Edith, and you're so good with them." I looked at my grandchildren again. Emma was staring at me through the glass with those huge, pleading eyes. Jake had fallen asleep against his car seat, his thumb in his mouth, a habit he had developed since his father's deployment. 2 weeks? I asked. "Maybe 3, but definitely no more than a month. I promise." Something in her voice made me pause. There was an excitement there, a barely contained energy that didn't match the story of a struggling single mother needing a break. But my grandchildren needed me, and I had never been able to say no when they needed me. "Of course," I said. "Bring them in." Victoria's relief was immediate and overwhelming. She practically sprinted to the car, pulling out 2 small suitcases and a garbage bag filled with what looked like hastily packed clothes and toys. "You're a lifesaver, Edith. Really. I don't know what I'd do without you." She hugged me quickly, but I could feel her pulling away even as her arms were around me. "I'll call every day to check on them." But she didn't call every day. She didn't call at all for the first week. When Emma asked where Mommy was, I told her she was taking a little vacation and would be back soon. When Jake cried for her at bedtime, I held him and sang the lullabies I had sung to his father 25 years earlier. 2 weeks passed, then 3, then 4. The phone calls, when they came, were brief and filled with excuses. Victoria's voice carried the sound of laughter and music in the background. Beach parties, nightclubs, the life of a woman without responsibilities. "The weather is just incredible here, Edith. And Stephanie's friend has this amazing yacht. I'm learning to scuba dive. Can you believe it? I'm finally finding myself again." "When are you coming home, Victoria?" The children are asking. "Soon, honey. Very soon. Maybe another week or 2. Is that okay? You're doing such a wonderful job with them." But I wasn't doing this job by choice anymore. I was doing it because 2 innocent children had been abandoned, and there was no one else. It was during the 6th week that I made the decision that would change everything. I was helping Emma with her homework when she looked up at me with those serious eyes and said, "Grandma Edith, is Mommy ever coming back?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I suddenly realized Emma had been carrying this fear alone, and she was only 8 years old. "Of course she's coming back, sweetheart. Mommy loves you very much." "Then why hasn't she called me?" "It's been 4 days since she last called, and she promised she would call every day." 4 days. I hadn't even noticed because Victoria's calls had become so sporadic, so meaningless, but Emma had been counting. That night, after I tucked both children into bed in the guest room that had become their room, I sat in my kitchen and made a decision. I called Victoria. "Edith, how are my babies?" "They're not your babies right now, Victoria. They're mine, and that needs to change." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, the sunny vacation voice was gone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you need to come home. Now. These children need their mother, not a grandmother who's too old to be chasing a 5-year-old around a playground every day." "I'm not ready to come home yet." "Then when will you be ready?" "I don't know, Edith. I'm finally happy for the first time in years. Can't you understand that?" "I understand that you're a mother, and your children need you." The conversation ended badly. Victoria hung up on me, and I didn't hear from her for another week. When she finally called back, everything had changed. "Edith, we need to talk." "Good. When are you coming home?" "I'm not coming home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I've met someone here and I'm thinking of making this permanent. I want the kids to join me." My blood ran cold. "Victoria, you can't just uproot them. They're settled here. They're in school. Emma has friends." "They're my children, Edith. I can do whatever I want with them." "Not if you're not here taking care of them. You can't." "Are you threatening me?" I realized in that moment that I was. And I realized something else. I wasn't the helpless grandmother she thought I was. I had spent 35 years navigating family court. I knew the system better than most lawyers. And I had something Victoria didn't have: documentation. "I'm not threatening you, Victoria. I'm informing you. If you want your children, you need to come home and be their mother. If you don't, then we need to discuss what's best for Emma and Jake." She hung up again. But this time, I wasn't surprised. 3 days later, the legal papers arrived. Victoria was suing me for custody of the children, claiming I had manipulated her into leaving them with me, and was now refusing to return them. She was asking for emergency custody and accusing me of kidnapping. I stared at those papers for a long time, sitting in the same kitchen where I had fed my grandchildren breakfast every morning for 2 months, where I had helped with homework and kissed scraped knees and wiped away tears. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. And anger, I was about to learn, could be a very powerful weapon in the right hands. That afternoon, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. But desperate times call for desperate allies, and I was about to wage a war for my grandchildren's future. The envelope I would hand to that judge 6 weeks later was already beginning to form in my mind. The phone rang at 7 in the morning, exactly 72 hours after I received Victoria's legal papers. I was making pancakes for Emma and Jake when the caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in years: Margaret Sullivan, private investigator. "Edith Chamberlain, you old fox. I heard through the grapevine that you might need my services." Margaret had been my secret weapon back in my court mediator days, when parents lied about income, when they hid assets, when they claimed to be sober while stumbling through custody hearings. Margaret was the one who uncovered the truth. She was 70 years old, sharp as a razor, and had zero tolerance for people who put their own desires above their children's welfare. "Margaret, I need everything you can find on my daughter-in-law, and I need it fast. The one who's suing you for kidnapping her own kids while she's living it up in Miami? How did you—" "Honey, I've been in this business for 45 years. Bad mothers talk, and their friends talk louder. Give me a week." But Margaret didn't need a week. She needed 3 days. The file she brought to my house was thick enough to choke a horse. She set it down on my kitchen table with a satisfaction that reminded me why she had been the best in the business. "Victoria Chamberlain, née Morrison, 28 years old, married your son 4 years ago, 2 children. And Edith, sweetheart, you're not going to like what I found. Emma and Jake were at school, so I could speak freely. Tell me. First, let's talk about Miami. Your daughter-in-law isn't just taking a break. She's moved in with a man named Carlos Mendez, 52 years old, owns 3 nightclubs and has a very interesting relationship with the IRS. She's been posting on social media like she's auditioning for a reality show. Margaret opened her laptop and turned it toward me. Victoria's Instagram page filled the screen, and I felt my stomach drop. Photo after photo of Victoria in bikinis, expensive restaurants, yacht parties. The timestamps showed she had been posting every single day for the past 2 months. "Look at this one," Margaret said, clicking on a photo of Victoria in a tiny silver dress, champagne glass raised to the camera. The caption read, "Finally living my best life. No responsibilities, no drama, just pure happiness. Miami nights, her new life, no looking back." The photo was posted the same day Emma had asked me if Mommy was ever coming back. "There's more," Margaret continued. "Carlos has been married 3 times. The last wife took him to court for domestic violence. The charges were dropped when she suddenly moved to Spain and stopped cooperating with prosecutors." I stared at the photos, feeling a cold anger settle in my chest. "What about money?" "That's where it gets interesting. Victoria cleaned out the joint account she shared with your son. $23,000, withdrawn in cash the day before she left. She also took a cash advance on their credit cards, $15,000. Michael doesn't know. How could he? He's in Afghanistan dealing with real problems while his wife is pretending to be 22 again." Margaret closed the laptop and pulled out a manila folder. "But here's the smoking gun, Edith. Victoria's lawyer filed those custody papers, but look at the address she gave for her current residence." She handed me a document. Victoria's address was listed as a luxury high-rise in Miami Beach. She signed a 1-year lease on a 2-bedroom apartment, paid 6 months in advance. "This isn't a vacation, Edith. She moved to Miami permanently and left her children behind." I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. A 2-bedroom apartment. Exactly. 1 bedroom for her, 1 for Carlos. No room for children. She never intended to take them with her. The papers scattered across my kitchen table told the story of a woman who had abandoned her family to chase a fantasy, then tried to destroy the person who had stepped in to clean up her mess. "There's one more thing," Margaret said quietly. "I found out why she filed the lawsuit when she did." "Why?" "Carlos is getting nervous. His immigration status isn't exactly solid, and having a woman with custody issues living with him is making him paranoid. He told Victoria she needed to either bring the kids to Miami or cut ties completely. The lawsuit is her way of trying to maintain control without actually having to be a mother." I stared at the evidence spread before me. Photos, financial records, lease agreements, social media posts. 2 months of Victoria's new life, documented in excruciating detail. "How much do I owe you, Margaret?" "For you? Nothing. I've got grandchildren too, and what she's doing to those babies makes me sick." That afternoon, I made another phone call. This one to James Morrison, Victoria's father. We had met only twice, at Victoria's wedding and at Jake's christening. He was a quiet man, a retired accountant who had seemed overwhelmed by his daughter's dramatic tendencies. "Mr. Morrison, this is Edith Chamberlain, Victoria's mother-in-law." "Oh, hello, Edith. How are Emma and Jake? Victoria told us they were staying with you while she took a little vacation." "Mr. Morrison, that vacation has lasted 2 months, and now Victoria is suing me, claiming I kidnapped the children." There was a long silence. "She's what?" "I think you and your wife need to know what's really happening." An hour later, James Morrison and his wife Carol were sitting in my living room, staring at Margaret's evidence file with the same sick expression I had worn 3 days earlier. "I don't understand," Carol whispered, looking at a photo of Victoria dancing on a table at what appeared to be a nightclub. "She told us she was staying with a girlfriend, just getting some rest. She's living with a man named Carlos Mendez. She signed a year-long lease. She's spent over $30,000 of Michael's money, and she's posted on social media every single day, but hasn't called her children in a week." James Morrison was quiet for a long time, studying a photo of Victoria kissing Carlos on a yacht. "What can we do to help? I need you to testify about what she told you. I need you to confirm that she said this was temporary when you know she had already signed a permanent lease." "Of course," Carol said immediately. "Those children, how are they handling this? They're confused. Jake keeps asking when Mommy is coming home. Emma has started wetting the bed again, something she hadn't done since she was 4. James Morrison's jaw tightened. We'll do whatever you need." That evening, after Emma and Jake were asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and began organizing everything: financial records, social media screenshots, witness statements, lease agreements, phone records showing the declining frequency of Victoria's calls to her children. But I needed more. I needed something that would make a judge understand not just that Victoria had abandoned her children, but that returning them to her would be dangerous. I called Margaret back. "I need you to find out everything you can about Carlos Mendez. Everything." "Already on it, honey. I had a feeling you'd want to dig deeper." "And Margaret? I need to know if there are any photos or videos of Victoria with the children. Anything that shows how she treated them before she left." "What kind of thing are you looking for?" I thought about Emma's fear that her mother wasn't coming back, about Jake's regression to thumb-sucking and bedwetting, about the casual way Victoria had packed their clothes in garbage bags. I'm looking for proof that she was already checked out as a mother long before she left for Miami. Give me another week. But I didn't have another week. Victoria's lawyers had filed for an emergency hearing. The court date was set for the following Friday. I had 6 days to build a case that would protect my grandchildren from a mother who had decided they were inconvenient accessories to the life she really wanted. That night, I started making a list, not just of evidence, but of allies, people who had seen Victoria's behavior before Miami, teachers, neighbors, other mothers, people who had witnessed what I was beginning to realize had been a pattern of neglect disguised as normal parenting. By the time I went to bed, I had 17 names on that list. The envelope that would change everything in that courtroom was beginning to take shape. But first, I had to prepare for war. And in family court, the side with the better story doesn't always win. The side with the better evidence does. Victoria thought she was fighting a lonely old woman who didn't understand her rights. She had no idea she was about to face someone who had spent 35 years learning exactly how to destroy people like her. The battle for Emma and Jake was about to begin. The first call came at 6:30 in the morning. Sarah Chen, Emma's second-grade teacher, had heard about the lawsuit through the school's parent network. "Mrs. Chamberlain, I hope you don't mind me calling so early, but I needed to speak with you before school starts." I was already awake, had been since 4, sitting at my kitchen table reviewing Margaret's files and preparing questions for the witnesses I planned to interview. "Of course, Sarah. What's on your mind?" "It's about Emma, and about Victoria." Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if someone might be listening. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but when I heard Victoria was trying to get the children back, I had to reach out. "What do you mean?" "Mrs. Chamberlain, in all my years of teaching, I've never seen a parent show as little interest in their child's education as Victoria showed in Emma's. Parent-teacher conferences? She missed 3 out of 4 this year. The school play where Emma had a speaking role? She didn't come. The field trip permission slips? They came back signed, but Emma told me you were the one who actually read them to her." I felt a familiar cold anger settling in my chest. "What else, Sarah?" "The day before Victoria left for Miami, she came to pick up Emma early. She said there was a family emergency. But Mrs. Chamberlain, Emma came to school the next day and told me her mommy had taken her to get a pedicure because she wanted to look pretty for her trip. A 7-year-old getting a pedicure while her mother prepared to abandon her. I wrote down every word. "Would you be willing to put this in writing?" "I already have. I'll email it to you this morning." "And Mrs. Chamberlain? There's a group of us mothers who've been talking. We want to help." By 9 o'clock, my phone had rung 6 more times. The parent network had activated itself, and the stories they told painted a picture of Victoria that made my stomach turn. Lisa Rodriguez, whose daughter Sophia was Emma's best friend, had the most damaging testimony. "Edith, I have to tell you about the sleepover incident." "What sleepover incident?" 3 months before Victoria left, Emma was supposed to sleep over at our house. It was planned for weeks, but at the last minute, Victoria called and said Emma couldn't come because they had family plans. The next day, Sophia saw Emma at the grocery store with you. When Sophia asked Emma about the family plans, Emma said her mommy had gone to a party and didn't want to hire a babysitter. Victoria left Emma alone? No, that's just it. Victoria called you to come watch Emma so she could go party, then lied to me about why Emma couldn't come to our house. She chose to burden you rather than let her daughter have fun with her friends. I added Lisa's name to my witness list. The most heartbreaking call came from Mrs. Peterson, an elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses down from Victoria and Michael's house. Mrs. Chamberlain, I've been watching those children play in their yard for years, and I've been worried about them for almost as long. Worried how? Victoria would put them outside and tell them to go play while she talked on the phone or did her nails. Hours would go by. Little Jake would come to my fence crying because he was hungry or needed to use the bathroom, but Victoria wouldn't answer the door. I started keeping snacks and juice boxes specifically for those children. How often did this happen? At least once a week for the past year, maybe more. And Mrs. Chamberlain, the morning Victoria left for Miami, she had those children packed and in the car by 7 a.m. Jake was crying because he didn't understand what was happening, and Victoria kept telling him to stop being a baby. When I asked if everything was all right, she told me she was taking them to their grandma's house for a fun vacation. She made it sound like a treat, not an abandonment. Mrs. Peterson's voice broke. Those babies didn't know they weren't coming home. I spent the morning collecting statements, and by lunch, I had a clear picture of Victoria's parenting style. Absent when it mattered, manipulative when it benefited her, and consistently prioritizing her own comfort over her children's needs. But I needed more than neighborhood gossip. I needed professional testimony. My next call was to Dr. Amanda Foster, the pediatrician who had been seeing Emma and Jake since they were babies. Dr. Foster, this is Edith Chamberlain, Emma and Jake's grandmother. I need to ask you about their medical history. Mrs. Chamberlain, you know I can't discuss their medical records without proper authorization. I understand, but I'm asking about appointments that were missed, concerns you may have noted, anything that might be relevant to a custody case. There was a long pause. Are you telling me Victoria is fighting you for custody after abandoning those children with you? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Give me an hour to review their files, then call me back. When I called Dr. Foster back, her tone had completely changed. Mrs. Chamberlain, I've been Emma and Jake's doctor for years, and I've documented some concerning patterns. Victoria missed 60% of their scheduled appointments this year. When she did bring them in, she was often distracted, on her phone, and seemed impatient with any discussion about their health or development. What kind of concerns did you document? Emma came in 3 times with what appeared to be stress-related symptoms. Stomach aches with no physical cause, trouble sleeping, regression in some developmental markers. When I asked about changes in the home environment, Victoria insisted everything was fine and seemed annoyed that I was asking questions. And Jake? Jake showed signs of attachment anxiety starting about 6 months ago. Excessive clinginess, fear of being left alone, behavioral regression. Classic signs of a child who isn't feeling secure in his primary relationships. I felt the pieces clicking into place. Dr. Foster, would you be willing to testify that these children were showing signs of stress and insecurity even before Victoria left? Mrs. Chamberlain, I'll do whatever I can to help those children. What Victoria is doing, it's not just wrong, it's potentially harmful to their psychological development. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse to file my response to Victoria's lawsuit. But I wasn't just filing a response. I was filing a counter-petition for permanent custody, and I was requesting that the court order a full psychological evaluation of Victoria before any custody decision was made. The clerk who helped me was a woman named Janet, who had worked family court for 20 years. She glanced at my paperwork and raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Chamberlain, you've got quite a case here. I hope so. Honey, I've seen a lot of custody battles, and the evidence you're presenting is more thorough than most lawyers manage. You said you used to be a court mediator? For 35 years. Janet smiled. That explains it. You know what judges want to see. I know what children need. The legal system is just the tool I'm using to make sure they get it. As I left the courthouse, my phone rang. It was Margaret. Edith, I've got news about Carlos Mendez. Bad news for Victoria, good news for you. Tell me. Carlos was arrested 2 days ago on tax evasion charges. Nothing to do with Victoria, but the FBI raided his apartment and froze his assets. Guess who's been living on his money for the past 2 months? I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. Victoria's fantasy life just got a lot more complicated. That's not all. I managed to get in touch with Carlos's ex-wife, the one who moved to Spain. She's willing to talk about what it was like living with him. And Edith, Victoria has no idea what she's gotten herself into. How bad is it? Bad enough that when Victoria finds out Carlos is in legal trouble, she's going to panic. Bad enough that her Miami paradise is about to come crashing down around her ears. And when it does, she's going to try to come home and pretend none of this ever happened. She's going to show up at your door with tears and apologies and expect you to hand over those children like nothing happened. I thought about Emma asking if Mommy was ever coming back, about Jake crying himself to sleep, about 2 months of bedtime stories and scraped knees and homework help while their mother posted party photos on social media. Margaret, I need you to document everything about Carlos's arrest and Victoria's living situation. I want to know the exact moment she finds out her sugar daddy is in federal custody. Already on it. I've got a contact in Miami who's keeping an eye on the apartment building. The moment Victoria makes any move to leave Miami, you'll know about it. That evening, I tucked Emma and Jake into bed as I had every night for 2 months. Jake asked his usual question. When is Mommy coming home, Grandma Edith? For the first time, I had an answer that felt honest. I don't know when Mommy is coming home, sweetheart, but I do know that you're safe here with me, and that's not going to change. Emma looked up from her pillow. Are we in trouble, Grandma? Some kids at school said their parents are talking about us. I sat down on the edge of her bed and smoothed her hair. You're not in trouble, Emma. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults have to work out complicated problems, and that's what's happening now. But no matter what happens, you and Jake are loved and safe. Will we have to go live with Mommy and that man? My blood ran cold. What man, sweetheart? The man in the pictures on Mommy's phone. She showed us pictures before she left and said maybe we'd get to meet him someday. Victoria had shown her children pictures of Carlos before abandoning them with me. She had been planning this for longer than I thought. After the children were asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the laptop Margaret had lent me. I scrolled through Victoria's social media posts from the past 2 months, seeing them now through the eyes of a woman who was building a legal case rather than a heartbroken grandmother. Every post was evidence. Every party photo was proof that Victoria had chosen her new life over her children. Every day that passed without her calling them was documented in her online activity. But as I scrolled, I noticed something else. The posts had stopped 3 days ago, right around the time Carlos was arrested. Victoria's Miami fantasy was over, which meant the real battle was just beginning. I closed the laptop and looked at the thick folder of evidence I had compiled in just 5 days. Witness statements, medical records, financial documentation, social media screenshots. The envelope that would destroy Victoria's case was almost complete, but I wasn't done yet, because I had learned something important during my 35 years in family court. The truth doesn't always win. The best presented truth wins. And I was about to present a case that would leave no doubt about what was best for Emma and Jake. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night. I was in my study, organizing witness statements for the court hearing that was now just 2 days away, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Miami area code. Edith? Victoria's voice was different. Gone was the breezy confidence, the party girl laughter in the background. She sounded small, scared, almost like the young woman who had married my son 4 years ago. Victoria, it's late. I know, I'm sorry. But I needed to talk to you. I needed to explain. Explain what? How you abandoned your children for 2 months and then tried to have me arrested for kidnapping? It's not like that, Edith. You don't understand what I've been going through. I leaned back in my chair, my hand moving instinctively to the recorder app on my phone. In 35 years of family court work, I had learned that late-night phone calls often contained the most honest admissions. Then explain it to me, Victoria. Help me understand how a mother walks away from her children and doesn't call them for weeks at a time. I was drowning, Edith. Michael's been gone for 6 months, and I was handling everything alone. The kids were driving me crazy, the house was falling apart, and I needed to breathe. So you decided to breathe in Miami with another man's money? There was a long pause. You know about Carlos. I know about Carlos. I know about the apartment lease. I know about the $38,000 you took from your joint accounts. I know about the parties and the yachts and the social media posts while your children cried themselves to sleep, asking when Mommy was coming home. Oh God, her voice broke. Edith, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I was so unhappy, and Carlos made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I was more than just a mother and a military wife. You are more than that, Victoria. But you're not less than that. Being a mother isn't something you get to take a vacation from. I know that now. Everything's fallen apart here. Carlos, he's in trouble, legal trouble. And I realized I don't belong here. I want to come home. Here it was, the moment Margaret had predicted. Victoria's fantasy had crumbled, and now she wanted to slide back into her old life as if nothing had happened. What about the lawsuit, Victoria? What about accusing me of kidnapping? I'll drop it. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow and tell him I want to drop everything. We can just pretend this never happened. Pretend what never happened? That you abandoned your children? That you traumatized them? That you tried to destroy the person who stepped in to take care of them? Edith, please. I know I screwed up, but I'm their mother. They need their mother. They needed their mother 2 months ago. They need stability now. Victoria's voice turned sharp, and for a moment I heard the entitled young woman who had always believed the world should bend to her wishes. You can't keep them from me forever, Edith. They're my children. I have rights. You have responsibilities, Victoria. Rights are something you earn by fulfilling those responsibilities. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you. Those children have been through enough trauma. I won't let you put them through more just because your backup plan fell through. Backup plan? What are you talking about? Carlos was your backup plan, Victoria. When being a mother got too hard, you ran to him. Now that he can't provide the life you wanted, you want to run back to being a mother. But children aren't backup plans. They're human beings who deserve better. The conversation deteriorated from there. Victoria alternated between tears and threats, between apologies and demands. But what she didn't know was that every word was being recorded, and every admission was building my case stronger. I never meant for this to happen, she sobbed. I just wanted to be happy for once in my life. At whose expense, Victoria? I thought you loved having them. I thought it was working out for everyone. I do love having them, but I love them enough to want what's best for them, not what's easiest for me. And you think what's best for them is never seeing their mother again? I think what's best for them is having a mother who puts them first. And Victoria, in 2 months of social media posts, in weeks of phone calls, in all your explanations tonight, you haven't once asked me how they're doing. You haven't asked if Emma is still having nightmares, or if Jake has stopped asking when you're coming home. You've talked about your happiness, your needs, your mistakes, your problems, but not once have you asked about your children. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long, I thought she had hung up. How are they doing? They're healing, Victoria, slowly, with consistency and love and patience. Things they weren't getting before you left. What do you mean before I left? I was a good mother before I left. This was the opening I had been waiting for. Were you, Victoria? Were you a good mother when you missed 60% of their doctor's appointments? When you left them outside for hours while you talked on the phone? When you made Emma miss a sleepover so you could go to a party? When you showed them pictures of Carlos and told them they might meet him someday? How do you know about... I know about all of it, Victoria. Every missed appointment, every neglected moment, every time you chose your convenience over their well-being. This didn't start in Miami. Miami was just where it became impossible to hide. She was crying now, deep, ugly sobs that might have moved me 2 months ago. But I had heard too many late-night confessions, seen too many crocodile tears in family court. Victoria wasn't crying for her children. She was crying for herself. What do you want from me, Edith? I want you to think about what's best for Emma and Jake. Really think about it. Not what's easiest for you, not what makes you feel better about your choices, but what's actually best for 2 children who have already been through more trauma than any child should experience. You want me to just give up? Just walk away from my own children? I want you to grow up, Victoria. I want you to consider that maybe, just maybe, the best thing you can do for those children right now is to step back and let them heal. I can change, Edith. I can be better. Can you? Because change isn't just about wanting to be better. It's about doing the work, consistently, even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when there's no applause or validation. It's about putting someone else's needs before your own every single day. Are you ready for that? The question hung in the air between us. I don't know. she whispered finally. I honestly don't know. It was the first honest thing she had said in the entire conversation. Then maybe that's your answer, Victoria. After she hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, staring at the recording app on my phone. Victoria had just confessed to abandoning her children, admitted she didn't know if she could prioritize their needs, and revealed that her decision to come home was based entirely on her own circumstances changing, not on any real desire to be their mother. But more than that, she had revealed something I could use in court. Something that would make any judge understand exactly what kind of person we were dealing with. She hadn't asked about her children until I prompted her to. Even in a conversation about custody, even when begging to have them back, she had talked only about herself until I forced her to remember that Emma and Jake existed. The next morning, I transcribed the entire conversation and added it to my evidence file. But before I did anything else, I did something Victoria hadn't thought to do. I checked on the children. Emma was at the kitchen table working on a science project about butterflies. She looked up when I came in and smiled. Look, Grandma Edith, I'm writing about the monarch butterfly migration. Did you know they travel 3,000 miles to find a safe place to live? That's amazing, sweetheart. What else did you learn? Sometimes the butterflies have to leave dangerous places to protect themselves and find somewhere better. The teacher said it's called survival instinct. I looked at my granddaughter, 8 years old and already understanding concepts her mother couldn't grasp. Emma was learning that sometimes you have to leave dangerous situations to find safety. She was learning about the courage it takes to find a better life. If only Victoria could learn the same lesson. That afternoon, Margaret called with an update on Carlos's situation. It's worse than we thought, Edith. The FBI found evidence that Carlos was laundering money through his nightclubs. Victoria's been living off dirty money for 2 months, and she probably has no idea. How much trouble could she be in? If they can prove she knew about the money laundering, serious trouble. But more importantly for your case, it proves that Victoria's judgment is completely compromised. She moved in with a man she barely knew, spent money she didn't ask questions about, and put herself in a situation that could have legal consequences. What about custody? No family court judge is going to award custody to someone who might be facing federal charges. But Edith, there's something else. Victoria bought a plane ticket this morning. She's flying back tomorrow. My stomach tightened. She's coming home. She's running home, because her options in Miami just disappeared, which means she's going to show up desperate, and desperate people do unpredictable things. That night, I double-checked all the locks on my doors and made sure my phone was fully charged. I had a feeling the next 24 hours were going to test everything I had learned about protecting the people I loved. The court hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Victoria would be home Thursday night. The final battle was about to begin, and I was as ready as I would ever be. The envelope that would change everything was complete. Now I just had to make sure I lived long enough to deliver it. If you're following my story and you've ever had to fight for what's right when everyone thought you were too old or too weak, subscribe and let me know in the comments. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by the people others underestimate the most. Victoria's rental car pulled into my driveway at 9:15 Thursday evening. I watched from my living room window as she sat behind the wheel for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the house where her children had been living without her for 2 months. Even from a distance, I could see that Miami Victoria was gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, and when she finally stepped out of the car, she moved like a woman who had aged years in just days. Emma and Jake were asleep upstairs. I had decided not to tell them their mother was coming home until I knew what she actually intended to do. The doorbell rang at 9:26. "Hello, Victoria." She looked worse up close. The tan was fading, revealing the stress underneath. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she clutched a small overnight bag like a lifeline. "Can I come in, please?" I stepped aside, and she walked into the living room where her children had been building pillow forts and doing homework while she posted party photos on Instagram. "They're asleep," I said simply. "I know. I saw their bedroom light was off." She sat down heavily on the couch. "Edith, I owe you an apology. A huge apology. You owe your children more than that." I know I do." She looked around the room, taking in the evidence of the life that had continued without her. Jake's toy trucks on the coffee table, Emma's school artwork on the refrigerator, the routine and stability she had walked away from. Can I see them? They're sleeping. And after what they've been through, I'm not going to wake them up to deal with more emotional chaos. Victoria flinched. I'm their mother. Being their mother is more than biology, Victoria. It's more than showing up when your backup plan falls apart. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Carlos gets arrested, your fantasy life crumbles, and suddenly you remember you have children. That's exactly what this is. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but they seemed different from the manipulative tears I had heard over the phone. These looked real. I don't know how to fix this, Edith. I don't know how to undo what I've done. You can't undo it, Victoria. You can only decide what you're going to do next. What if I drop the lawsuit? What if I agree to joint custody? You could keep them during the week, and I could have them on weekends. I studied her face, looking for signs of the entitled young woman who had tried to have me arrested for kidnapping. What I saw instead was someone who was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had done. Why would you want that, Victoria? Because they need stability. Because you're good with them. Because maybe I'm not ready to be a full-time mother right now. It was the most honest thing I had heard her say since this whole nightmare began. What happened to Carlos, Victoria? Her face crumpled. The FBI raided his apartment Tuesday morning. They took everything. His computers, his files, boxes of financial records. They froze all his accounts, including the one I'd been using. Did you know about the money laundering? No. I swear to you, I had no idea. I thought he was just successful. I thought I had found someone who could give me the life I deserved. The life you deserved? What about the life your children deserved? I know how selfish that sounds. But Edith, you have to understand, I was so unhappy. Michael's been deployed more than he's been home in the past 3 years. I was 24 when I got married, and I felt like I missed out on everything. I never got to travel, never got to be young and stupid, never got to figure out who I was outside of being a wife and mother. I sat down across from her, and for the first time since this began, I tried to see the frightened young woman behind the selfish choices. Victoria, do you know what I was doing when I was 24? She shook her head. I was raising your husband. His father had just been killed in a construction accident, and I was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. I didn't get to travel either. I didn't get to be young and stupid, but I never once considered that I deserved a different life, more than my son deserved a stable childhood. That's different. You didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice either, Victoria. You became a mother. That comes with responsibilities whether you're ready for them or not. I'm not you, Edith. I'm not strong like you are. Strength isn't something you're born with, Victoria. It's something you develop by doing hard things, even when you don't want to. And the hardest thing you could do right now is admit that maybe your children are better off without you. She was crying again, but this time I could see she was really listening. Are they? Better off without me? I thought about Emma's nightmares that had finally stopped 2 weeks ago. About Jake sleeping through the night without crying for his mother. About homework being done on time, and doctor's appointments being kept, and consistent bedtime routines. They're better off with consistency, Victoria. They're better off with someone who puts their needs first every single day, not just when it's convenient. I could learn to do that. Could you? Because it's not just about wanting to learn. It's about doing the work when no one is watching, when there's no reward, when it's boring and thankless and endless. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Victoria spoke. What if I signed over custody to you? Permanently. My heart stopped. What? What if I admitted that you're right? What if I signed papers giving you full legal custody and I just visited sometimes, when I'm ready, when I can be better for them? I stared at her, looking for the trick, the manipulation, the selfish angle. But what I saw was a young woman who was finally, maybe for the first time in her adult life, thinking about what someone else needed more than what she wanted. Victoria, that's a huge decision. You can't make it when you're emotional and scared. I'm not making it because I'm scared. I'm making it because for the first time in 2 months, I'm thinking clearly. She wiped her eyes. Edith, I saw the way Emma looked at me the day I dropped them off. She knew. Somehow she knew I was leaving them. And I saw the relief on her face when you said they could stay. Emma is 8 years old, Victoria. She shouldn't have to feel relieved about being abandoned. I know. And that's exactly why I can't take them back right now. Because I'm still the person who made an 8-year-old feel relieved to be left behind. I studied Victoria's face, looking for any sign that this was another manipulation. But what I saw was something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse combined with realistic self-awareness. What about Michael? He's their father. He has a right to know what's happening. I'll call him tomorrow. I'll explain everything. I'll tell him that I made a terrible mistake and that the children are better off with you until I can figure out how to be the mother they deserve. And what will you do? Where will you go? My parents said I could come home for a while. Maybe I'll get some therapy. Maybe I'll figure out who I am when I'm not running away from responsibility. We talked until almost midnight, and slowly a plan began to emerge. Victoria would withdraw her lawsuit and agree to supervised visitation once a month until she could prove she was stable. She would enter counseling to address what had led to her abandonment of the children. She would get a job and start rebuilding her life in a way that didn't depend on anyone else's money or validation. Most importantly, she would tell Emma and Jake the truth, that she had made mistakes, that she needed time to become better, and that living with Grandma Edith was what was best for them right now. "Can I see them before I go tomorrow?" she asked. "Victoria, if you see them, you need to be prepared to have a very difficult conversation. They're going to have questions you might not be ready to answer. I know, but I owe them at least that much." The next morning, I woke Emma and Jake earlier than usual and explained that their mother was downstairs and wanted to talk to them. Emma's reaction surprised me. "Is she taking us away, Grandma Edith?" "I don't think so, sweetheart, but you should talk to her and hear what she has to say." When the children came downstairs, Victoria was sitting at the kitchen table with her hands folded, looking more nervous than I had ever seen her. Jake ran to her immediately and climbed into her lap, but Emma hung back, watching. "Hi, babies," Victoria said softly. "I missed you so much." "Where were you, Mommy?" Jake asked. "We kept asking Grandma Edith when you were coming home." Victoria looked at me, then back at her children. "I was in Florida, Jake. I was trying to figure some things out." "What kind of things?" Emma asked. "Grown-up things." "But Emma, Jake, I need to tell you something important. I made some big mistakes while I was gone. I should have called you more. I should have come home sooner. I should have been thinking about what you needed instead of what I wanted." Emma nodded, like this confirmed something she had already known. "Are we going to live with you again?" Jake asked. Victoria's voice broke slightly. "Not right now, sweetheart. Right now, you're going to keep living with Grandma Edith because she takes such good care of you. But I'm going to visit you, and maybe someday, when I'm better at being your mommy, we can talk about other arrangements." "Are you sick, Mommy?" Emma asked. "In a way, yes. I'm sick in my heart, and I need to get better before I can take care of you the way you deserve." The conversation lasted an hour, and by the end, both children seemed to understand that their mother was going away again. But this time, it was different. This time, she was being honest about why. After Victoria left to meet with her lawyer and withdraw the lawsuit, Emma came to me in the kitchen. "Grandma Edith, are we really going to keep living here?" "For now, yes. How do you feel about that?" "Good. I like living here. I like that you help me with my homework and that you make pancakes on Saturday mornings and that you read to us before bed. I like those things too, sweetheart." "Grandma Edith, I think Mommy is like the butterflies in my science project." "How so?" "Sometimes they have to fly away to find a safe place. Maybe Mommy had to fly away to find her safe place too." Out of the mouths of babes. That afternoon, Victoria's lawyer called to confirm that the lawsuit had been officially withdrawn. The court hearing scheduled for that morning had been canceled. The battle I had been preparing for was over before it began. But as I sat in my kitchen that evening, helping Jake color a picture while Emma read quietly nearby, I realized this hadn't been about winning a legal battle. It had been about something much more important. It had been about two children learning that they were worthy of being protected, that someone would fight for them when they couldn't fight for themselves. That love sometimes looks like letting go, and sometimes it looks like holding on no matter what. The envelope full of evidence was still sitting on my desk upstairs, unopened by any judge, but it had served its purpose anyway. Sometimes the most important victories happen before you ever set foot in a courtroom. The paperwork to become Emma and Jake's legal guardian took 3 weeks to process. 3 weeks of meetings with social workers, background checks, and court appointments that felt more like formalities than obstacles. When you have 35 years of experience in family court and a file full of evidence documenting abandonment, the system tends to move quickly. Victoria kept her word. She attended every required meeting, signed every document, and answered every uncomfortable question the court-appointed advocate asked her. She looked smaller each time I saw her, like someone who was finally understanding the weight of what she had given up. The day the guardianship became official, I took Emma and Jake to lunch at their favorite restaurant to celebrate. It was a modest place, with crayons on the tables and a children's menu shaped like a dinosaur. But they loved it. "Does this mean we get to stay with you forever, Grandma Edith?" Jake asked, coloring a T-Rex purple. "It means you get to stay with me for as long as you need to, sweetheart. Until you're all grown up, if that's what you want." Emma looked up from her grilled cheese sandwich. "What about when Daddy comes home from the army?" "When your daddy comes home, we'll all figure out what's best together. But no matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me." That evening, I called Michael. It was our third conversation since everything had started, and each one had been harder than the last. He was coming home on leave in 6 weeks, and I knew seeing his children living with their grandmother instead of their mother was going to be devastating. "Mom, I keep trying to understand how this happened," he said. His voice sounded older, worn down by months of deployment and the shock of learning about Victoria's choices. "Your wife was drowning, Michael, and instead of asking for help, she ran away. But the kids, how are they handling all this?" "They're resilient. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Emma understands more than she should have to, and Jake is just happy to have stability. They ask about Victoria, but they're not falling apart without her. That's what scares me, Mom. What does it say about the kind of mother she was if they're better off without her?" I thought about how to answer that. "It says that children adapt to survive, Michael. It doesn't mean they didn't love her. It means they needed something she couldn't give them. And you can? Give them what they need? I'm doing my best. And Michael, I need you to know that when you come home, nothing has to change unless you want it to. These are your children. You make the decisions about their future. Mom, I've got 18 months left on this deployment. I can't take care of them from Afghanistan, and I sure as hell can't trust Victoria to do it. You're not just helping me out. You're saving my kids." 2 days later, Margaret stopped by with coffee and updates on Victoria's situation. "She's living with her parents and seeing a therapist twice a week," Margaret reported, settling into my kitchen chair with the familiarity of an old friend. "She got a job at a local real estate office. Nothing fancy, but she's showing up every day and apparently doing decent work." "And Carlos?" "Pleaded guilty to money laundering and tax evasion. He got 5 years federal prison and a $2 million fine. Victoria dodged a bullet by coming home when she did." I poured myself coffee and thought about how close my grandchildren had come to having a mother in federal prison. "She wants to see the kids again," I said. "She's asked for a supervised visit next weekend. How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, terrified. But not because I think she'll try to take them. I'm terrified because I can see she's really trying to change, and I don't want the kids to get their hopes up if she can't sustain it." Margaret studied my face. "Edith, you know this arrangement might not be permanent, right? If Victoria really gets her act together, if Michael comes home and wants his family back together." "I know. And if that happens, it happens. But Margaret, for the first time in months, those children are thriving. Emma's grades are up, Jake has stopped having nightmares, and they both seem genuinely happy. Whatever happens in the future, right now they're exactly where they need to be." That weekend, Victoria came for her first supervised visit. We had agreed she would take the children to the park for 2 hours while I stayed nearby, close enough to help if needed, but far enough away to give them space. I watched from a bench 50 yards away as Victoria pushed Jake on the swings and helped Emma across the monkey bars. She looked different, more present, more focused on them instead of on her phone or her own discomfort. When they came back to me, both children seemed happy but not overly excited. It was a good sign. They were treating Victoria like a pleasant visitor rather than desperately hoping she would take them home. "How did it go?" I asked Emma quietly, while Victoria was getting Jake a drink from the water fountain. "Good. Mommy seems calmer. She asked me about school and listened to my answers. She didn't seem like she was somewhere else in her head." My 8-year-old granddaughter had just given me the most insightful evaluation of Victoria's mental state I could have asked for. That night, after the children were in bed, Victoria and I sat on my front porch and talked. "They're different," she said. "More confident. Emma especially. She's not walking on eggshells anymore." "Was she walking on eggshells before?" Victoria was quiet for a long time. "I think she was. I think she spent a lot of energy trying to keep me happy, trying not to upset me. And she's just a little girl. She shouldn't have had to do that." It was another moment of clarity from a woman who was slowly learning to see her children as separate people with their own needs. "Victoria, I want you to know that these visits can continue as long as you're consistent and healthy. But I also want you to know that the children are settled now. They're not waiting for their lives to begin again. They're living their lives. I understand. And Edith, thank you for everything, for taking them when I couldn't handle it, for protecting them when I was being selfish, for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." As I watched Victoria drive away that evening, I realized that something had shifted. The crisis was over. The emergency phase had passed. Now we were in the long, slow work of building a new normal. The envelope full of evidence was still in my desk drawer, a reminder of how close we had all come to disaster. But it wasn't needed anymore. The truth had won without ever seeing the inside of a courtroom. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that happen so quietly. No one realizes a war was being fought. 3 months into our new normal, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about Victoria's abandonment. It came from the most unlikely source. Jake's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Williams. "Mrs. Chamberlain, I need to share something with you," she said during our scheduled parent conference. Something I probably should have mentioned months ago, but I wasn't sure it was my place. Emma was at her piano lesson, and Jake was playing quietly in the corner of the classroom with building blocks. The afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the small tables and colorful bulletin boards. "What is it, Mrs. Williams?" "It's about Victoria, about why she really left for Miami." The teacher glanced toward Jake, then lowered her voice. 2 weeks before she dropped the children off with you, Victoria came to me in tears. She told me she was having what she called scary thoughts about the children. My blood ran cold. What kind of scary thoughts? She said she was having intrusive thoughts about hurting them, not intentionally, but she was terrified that her anger and frustration might lead to something she couldn't take back. She asked me if I knew of any resources, any help she could get. I stared at Mrs. Williams, trying to process what I was hearing. She was having thoughts of harming Emma and Jake? She was having thoughts, and she was scared of them. "Mrs. Chamberlain, I've been teaching for 23 years, and I've seen postpartum depression extend well beyond the baby years. I think Victoria was crying out for help the only way she knew how. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she ask for help? I think she was ashamed. And I think she believed that getting away from the children was the safest option for everyone." I sat in that tiny kindergarten chair, my world tilting on its axis. Victoria hadn't just abandoned her children for a selfish adventure. She had removed herself from a situation where she feared she might hurt them. "Mrs. Williams, why are you telling me this now?" "Because Victoria has been asking to volunteer in Jake's classroom. She wants to help with the upcoming school carnival. And frankly, Mrs. Chamberlain, she seems like a completely different person than the woman who came to me in crisis 6 months ago." That evening, I called Victoria and asked her to come over after the children were asleep. When she arrived, I didn't waste time with small talk. "Victoria, I spoke with Mrs. Williams today. She told me about your conversation with her before you left for Miami." Victoria's face went white. She sat down heavily on my couch, her hands shaking. "She told you about the thoughts? She told me you were scared you might hurt the children." "Oh God, Edith, I never told you because I was so ashamed. What kind of mother has thoughts like that about her own children? A mother who's struggling with mental health issues and doesn't know how to ask for help." Victoria started crying, deep, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from months of buried shame. "I loved them so much, but I was so angry all the time. At Michael for being deployed, at the children for needing so much, at myself for not being able to handle it. And sometimes, when Jake would have a meltdown or Emma would ask me the same question 15 times, I would have these flashes of wanting to shake them or scream at them or worse. But you never acted on those thoughts." "No, but I was terrified I might. That's why I called you that day. I told myself it was just for a few weeks, just until Michael came home. But really, I was running away before I did something I couldn't undo. I looked at this young woman who I had judged so harshly, and I realized I had been fighting the wrong battle. Victoria hadn't abandoned her children out of selfishness. She had removed herself from a situation where she felt dangerous. Victoria, why didn't you get help instead of running to Miami? Because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like a monster. And because Carlos offered me an escape that felt easier than facing what was wrong with me. We talked until almost midnight, and slowly, a different story emerged. Victoria's depression and anxiety had been building for months. The intrusive thoughts about harming her children had started small but grown more frequent and more intense. Her decision to go to Miami wasn't just about finding happiness. It was about removing herself from a situation where she felt like a danger to the people she loved most. "The therapy is helping," she said finally. "I'm on medication now, and I understand what was happening to me. Those thoughts, they weren't really me. They were symptoms of an illness I didn't know how to treat. And now I haven't had a single intrusive thought in 6 weeks. I think about the children every day, but it's different. I think about their homework and their friends and whether Jake is still afraid of the dark. Normal parent thoughts. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I called Victoria's therapist and asked for a professional evaluation of her current mental state and her fitness to spend unsupervised time with the children. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was thorough, professional, and ultimately cautiously optimistic. "Mrs. Chamberlain, Victoria has made significant progress. Her intrusive thoughts have resolved with medication and therapy, and she's developed healthy coping mechanisms for stress and anger. I believe supervised visits could safely be increased, and we could work toward unsupervised time if she continues to improve." That weekend, Victoria took Emma and Jake to the zoo by herself for the first time since she had returned from Miami. I stayed home, resisting the urge to call and check on them every hour. When they returned, both children were sunburned, exhausted, and happy. "Mommy bought me a stuffed elephant," Jake announced, showing me his new toy. "And she didn't get mad when I spilled ice cream on my shirt. She seemed really happy," Emma added. "Not pretend happy, real happy." That night, I realized that the story I thought I knew had been incomplete. Victoria's abandonment had been wrong, but it hadn't been purely selfish. Sometimes people make terrible choices for reasons that are more complicated than they appear. The envelope in my desk drawer contained evidence of Victoria's failures as a mother, but it didn't contain the whole truth. And maybe, just maybe, the whole truth was more hopeful than I had dared to believe. Michael's homecoming was nothing like the joyful reunion I had imagined. He stood in my driveway in his desert camouflage uniform, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, staring at the house where his children had been living without him for 8 months. His face was thinner, his eyes harder, and when Emma and Jake ran to him, his smile seemed forced. "Daddy!" Jake launched himself into Michael's arms, and for a moment, my son's face softened into something that looked like the young man I remembered. "Hey, buddy." "You got so big!" Michael lifted Jake easily, but his eyes were scanning the scene, taking inventory of a life that had continued without him. Emma hung back slightly, and I could see her studying her father's face the way she had learned to study adults for signs of emotional weather. "Hi, Daddy. We missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart." Michael set Jake down and knelt to hug Emma, but there was something careful about it, like he wasn't sure how to fit into this version of his family. That evening, after the children were in bed, Michael and I sat in my kitchen with coffee and the weight of everything that had happened. "Mom, I need to understand something. How are they so okay?" "What do you mean?" "I mean their mother abandoned them for 2 months. Their father has been gone for 8 months. Their whole world got turned upside down, and they seem fine. Happy even. How is that possible?" I studied my son's face, seeing the guilt and confusion there. "Children are resilient, Michael, and they've had stability here. Routine, consistency, love. But they should be more upset, shouldn't they? They should be angry or traumatized or something." "Are you upset that they're not traumatized?" "I'm upset that they're better off without their parents," he said quietly. There it was, the real issue. Michael felt guilty for being deployed, guilty for not seeing Victoria's breakdown coming, and guilty that his children had thrived in his absence. "Michael, They're not better off without their parents. They're better off with the stability they needed. You were serving your country. Victoria was sick. I stepped in because that's what families do. What about now? What happens now that I'm back? That depends on what you want to happen. Michael was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup. I don't know if I can do this, Mom. I don't know if I can be the father they need. Why would you think that? Because I've been gone so long that I feel like a stranger in their lives. Because Victoria and we're getting divorced. The papers are already filed. Because I have 18 months left on my contract, and I'll have to deploy again. I reached across the table and took my son's hand. Michael, being a father isn't about being perfect or being present every moment. It's about showing up when you can and making sure they know they're loved even when you can't be there. Like you did. Like we all do. When we need to. Over the next few days, I watched Michael rediscover his relationship with his children. He helped Emma with her math homework, taught Jake to throw a baseball properly, and slowly began to relax into the rhythms of their daily life. Victoria's reaction to Michael's return was surprisingly mature. She asked to meet with both of us to discuss custody arrangements going forward. I know I don't have the right to ask for much, she said, sitting across from us at my kitchen table. But I'd like to continue seeing the children regularly. I'm stable now, I'm working, and I want to be part of their lives. What are you thinking? Michael asked. I'm thinking that they're settled here with your mom, and that's working for everyone. When you deploy again, they'll need continuity. When you're home, you can spend as much time with them as you want. And I can visit on weekends, help with school events, be a real mother instead of just someone who shows up when it's convenient. It wasn't the arrangement any of us had planned, but it was the arrangement that put Emma and Jake first. There's one thing I need from both of you, I said. I need to know that this is permanent, that I'm not just a temporary solution until you figure out something better. Because these children have been through enough instability. Mom, Michael said, as far as I'm concerned, this is their home for as long as they need it to be. And I agree, Victoria added. Edith, you've given them something I couldn't give them, and Michael can't give them right now. Stability. They deserve that. 3 weeks later, Michael returned to his base, but this time it felt different. The children hugged him goodbye without desperation, secure in the knowledge that he would be back and that their life with me would continue unchanged. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question I had been dreading. Grandma Edith, are you sad that you have to take care of us instead of just being a regular grandma? I sat down on the edge of her bed and smoothed her hair. Emma, sweetheart, there is nothing I would rather be doing than taking care of you and Jake. You're not a burden. You're a gift. Even when Jake spills juice on the floor? Even when Jake spills juice on the floor? Even when I forget to put my dishes in the dishwasher? Even when you forget to put your dishes in the dishwasher? She smiled and closed her eyes. I love you, Grandma Edith. I love you too, sweetheart. As I turned off her light and walked downstairs, I realized that the crisis that had begun with Victoria's abandonment had evolved into something I never expected. A family that worked, just not in the traditional way. Sometimes the best outcomes come from the worst circumstances. Sometimes what looks like disaster is actually the beginning of something better. 6 months after Michael's return, Victoria's lawyer called with news that changed everything. Mrs. Chamberlain, Victoria would like to request a formal custody hearing to establish a permanent arrangement. My stomach dropped. What kind of arrangement? She wants to petition the court to make the current situation legal and binding. You, as primary guardian, Michael, with full parental rights during his leaves, and Victoria with supervised weekend visitation. I was quiet for so long the lawyer asked if I was still there. She wants to make this permanent? Legally? She wants to protect the children from any future uncertainty, and she wants to protect you from having to fight this battle again if anything changes. 2 weeks later, we all sat in the same family courtroom where I had once helped other families navigate their broken dreams. But this time was different. This time, everyone was asking for the same thing. Judge Patricia Hammond reviewed the paperwork with raised eyebrows. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Mrs. Victoria Chamberlain, you're voluntarily requesting that your mother-in-law be granted permanent guardianship of your children? Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Michael Chamberlain, you're supporting this arrangement? Yes, Your Honor. My mother has provided stability for my children that I cannot provide due to my military service. And Mrs. Edith Chamberlain, you're willing to take on permanent legal responsibility for 2 children at the age of 63? Your Honor, these children are my heart. There's nothing I wouldn't do for them. Judge Hammond looked at the 3 of us, then at Emma and Jake, sitting quietly in the front row. In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen a family voluntarily arrange themselves this way. Usually, I'm dealing with people fighting over children like their property. You 3 are arranging yourselves around what's best for the children. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. The longest part was when Judge Hammond spoke directly to Emma and Jake, asking them how they felt about the arrangement. I like living with Grandma Edith, Emma said clearly. She helps me with my homework and makes sure I eat vegetables. And I like that Daddy visits and Mommy visits too, but we don't have to worry about anyone leaving again. Jake nodded seriously. Grandma Edith reads me stories and doesn't get mad when I spill things. Judge Hammond smiled. Motion granted. Mrs. Edith Chamberlain is hereby granted permanent legal guardianship of Emma Rose Chamberlain and Jacob Michael Chamberlain, with full parental rights retained by Mr. Michael Chamberlain and supervised visitation rights granted to Mrs. Victoria Chamberlain. As we left the courthouse, Victoria stopped me on the steps. Edith, I know this isn't how families are supposed to work. Victoria, families work however they need to work. What matters is that Emma and Jake are loved and safe. Do you think they'll forgive me someday for leaving them? I looked at this young woman who had traveled so far from the selfish girl who had dropped her children on my doorstep 9 months ago. I think they already have, Victoria. Children forgive easier than adults do. The question is whether you can forgive yourself. That evening, I sat in my garden watching Emma and Jake play on the swing set Michael had installed during his last leave. The roses I had been tending the day Victoria first brought them to me were blooming again. A full cycle of seasons since our lives had been turned upside down. My phone rang. Margaret Sullivan. So, how does it feel to be a legal guardian? She asked, terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Any regrets? I watched Jake push Emma on the swing while she squealed with laughter, her hair flying in the wind. None. Not a single one. Good. Because Edith, what you did for those children, what you're still doing, it's extraordinary. I just did what needed to be done, Margaret. That's what makes it extraordinary. After I hung up, Emma came running over, grass stains on her knees and joy on her face. Grandma Edith, Jake wants to know if we can have hamburgers for dinner. We can have whatever you want for dinner, sweetheart. Can we have ice cream for dessert? It's Monday night. What do you think? Emma grinned. I think you're going to say ice cream is a weekend treat, but maybe we can have cookies instead. You know me too well. As we walked into the house together, I realized that the envelope of evidence was still in my desk drawer upstairs. The smoking gun that had never been fired. The case that had never been tried. Sometimes the most important battles are won not in courtrooms, but in kitchens and bedrooms and backyards. Not with evidence and testimony, but with consistency and love and the simple act of showing up every single day. The war for Emma and Jake had been won the moment I decided they were worth fighting for. Everything else was just paperwork. 1 year after the custody hearing, Victoria did something that shocked everyone, including herself. She moved back to town. I found a small apartment near the elementary school, she told me over coffee at the diner where we had started meeting monthly. I want to be closer to Emma and Jake. I want to be a real part of their lives, not just a weekend visitor. I studied her face, looking for signs of the impulsive decision-making that had led to Miami. What I saw instead was thoughtfulness, planning, genuine consideration for her children's needs. Victoria, are you sure about this? You've built a good life with your parents. You have a job, stability. I have a job here too. The real estate office has a branch in town, and they're transferring me. Edith, I've spent a year learning how to be healthy, how to manage my emotions, how to be someone worth knowing. I want to use those skills to be a better mother. What does this mean for our arrangement? It doesn't change anything legally. You're still their guardian. Their primary home is still with you. But maybe I could take them for dinner once a week. Maybe I could help with school pickup sometimes. Maybe I could just be present. 3 months later, Victoria's presence in their lives had settled into something comfortable and sustainable. She picked up Emma from piano lessons on Wednesdays, took both children to dinner on Friday evenings, and attended every school play, soccer game, and parent conference. The children's response surprised me most of all. They were happy to see her, but not desperate for her attention. They included her in their lives without centering their lives around her. It was exactly the healthy relationship I had hoped for, but never expected. The real test came when Michael returned for his next leave. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he said during his second night home. "Victoria and I have been talking." My blood ran cold. "About what?" "About maybe trying again. Not as husband and wife, but as co-parents. Real co-parents this time." "Michael, are you sure that's wise?" "I'm not sure about anything, Mom. But I see how she is with the kids now. She's different, and they need both their parents in their lives if possible." "They have both their parents in their lives. You know what I mean. They need us to be able to work together, to make decisions together, to show them that even when marriages end, families can still function." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of my life. Michael wanted to try shared custody when he returned from his final deployment. Victoria wanted to gradually take on more responsibility. Both of them were talking about the children's future as if they could simply erase the past year and start over. "I need you both to understand something," I said finally. "Emma and Jake are not your practice children. They're not guinea pigs for you to experiment with as you figure out how to be better parents. They've been through enough upheaval. We're not asking to uproot them," Victoria said. "We're asking to be more involved in the life they already have with you." "And what happens when you deploy again, Michael? What happens if Victoria has another breakdown? What happens to Emma and Jake when your good intentions collide with reality?" It was a harsh question, but it needed to be asked. Michael was quiet for a long time. "You're right. They need guarantees, not promises." "Then what are you proposing?" "That we all work together to create something sustainable. Not a fantasy of the perfect family, but a real plan that puts Emma and Jake's stability first." Over the next several weeks, we crafted an arrangement that felt more like a treaty than a custody agreement. Victoria would continue her gradual increase in responsibility, but with clear boundaries and contingency plans. Michael would remain actively involved during his leaves, but with the understanding that my home was the children's primary residence regardless of his military status. Most importantly, we established that any major changes to the arrangement would require unanimous agreement and a 6-month trial period. "Are you okay with this, Mom?" Michael asked after we finalized the details. "I'm okay with anything that works for Emma and Jake. But I need you both to understand that I'm not their backup plan anymore. I'm their primary plan. Everything else is supplementary." The first test of our new arrangement came 2 months later when Jake came down with pneumonia. Without discussion, Victoria canceled her work appointments to help me care for him. Michael called in every day from his base, and we functioned like the family team Emma and Jake needed us to be. As I sat in Jake's bedroom at 2 a.m, watching Victoria read him a story while his fever broke, I realized something had shifted fundamentally. We weren't trying to recreate the family that had broken apart. We were creating something entirely new, something that put the children first, always, and without question. Something that might actually work. If you've ever had to rebuild a family from broken pieces, subscribe and tell me how you made it work. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that don't look like anything you expected. The call came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, 18 months after our new arrangement began working. Michael's commanding officer was on the line, his voice formal and careful. "Mrs. Chamberlain, I'm calling to inform you that Sergeant Chamberlain was injured in a training accident. He's stable, but he'll be medically discharged and will need significant rehabilitation." By 6 a.m., Victoria and I were on a plane to Germany, where Michael was being treated at a military hospital. Emma and Jake stayed with my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who had become their honorary grandmother over the past 2 years. Michael's injuries were serious but not life-threatening. Shrapnel from an explosive device had damaged his left leg and left him with a traumatic brain injury that would require months of therapy. But he was alive, conscious, and desperately worried about his children. "Mom, I can't take care of them like this. I can't even take care of myself." "You don't have to take care of anyone right now except yourself," I told him. "Emma and Jake are safe. They're loved. They're taken care of. But the arrangement we worked out, all those plans about shared custody when I got out of the military. Michael, plans change. People change. Circumstances change. What doesn't change is that your children love you and need you in their lives, whatever that looks like. Victoria, who had barely left Michael's bedside for 3 days, looked up from the chair where she'd been sleeping. The children don't need you to be their primary caregiver to be their father, she said quietly. They need you to be present, to love them, to be part of their lives. Edith has given them stability. You give them something else entirely. Over the following weeks, as Michael began his long recovery, our family arrangement evolved again. Victoria took a leave of absence from work to help coordinate Michael's care. I flew back and forth between Germany and home, making sure Emma and Jake maintained their routines while staying connected to their father's recovery. The children handled their father's injury with the same resilience they had shown through everything else. Emma sent him drawings every day. Jake recorded himself reading simple books so Michael could hear his voice during therapy sessions. "Are you scared about Daddy?" I asked Emma one evening as we worked on her homework. "A little, but not like I was scared when Mommy left." "Why is it different?" "Because this time, everyone is telling us the truth, and because we know you're not going anywhere." 3 months later, Michael was transferred to a rehabilitation facility closer to home. His physical recovery was progressing well, but the traumatic brain injury had affected his short-term memory and emotional regulation. Some days, he was the Michael we remembered. Other days, he struggled to remember basic details or became frustrated and angry over small things. Victoria surprised everyone by how well she handled Michael's difficult days. The woman who had once fled from her own children's emotional needs became a steady, patient advocate for her ex-husband's recovery. "I understand what it feels like when your brain doesn't work the way it should," she told me one day as we sat in the hospital waiting room. "I know what it's like to feel like you're trapped in your own head. I can help him in ways other people can't." 6 months after the accident, Michael moved into a small apartment with assisted living services 15 minutes from my house. His physical recovery was complete, but he would always struggle with memory issues and emotional regulation. The shared custody arrangement we had planned was no longer possible, but something better emerged in its place. Michael became a constant, loving presence in his children's lives without the pressure of primary responsibility. He helped with homework when he was having good days, attended every school event, and took them on carefully planned outings that accommodated his limitations. Victoria became something none of us had expected, a true co-parent who supported everyone's needs rather than prioritizing her own. And I remained what I had become by necessity and choice, the steady center around which everything else revolved. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked me one evening as we watched Michael help Jake with a model airplane on my kitchen table while Emma practiced piano in the living room. "Regret what?" "Giving up your retirement to raise someone else's children." I looked around at the controlled chaos of my house. Homework on the dining room table, children's artwork on the refrigerator, the sounds of a family going about the ordinary business of living. "Victoria, this isn't someone else's life I'm living. This is my life. These aren't someone else's children I'm raising. These are my grandchildren, and I love them more than I ever thought possible. Even with all the sleepless nights and worry and responsibility? Especially with all of that." The arrangement that had begun as an emergency response to Victoria's abandonment had evolved into something none of us could have planned, but all of us could live with. Not perfect, but functional. Not traditional, but loving. And most importantly, it worked for Emma and Jake. Sometimes, the best families are the ones that nobody sees coming. 5 years after that first devastating phone call from Miami, I was cleaning out my desk when I found it. The manila envelope, thick with evidence, sealed and never opened by any judge. The smoking gun that had never been fired. Emma, now 13, was at the kitchen table working on a history project about World War II. Jake, 10 years old and obsessed with baseball statistics, was calculating batting averages at the counter. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in an extraordinary life. "Grandma Edith." "What's that?" Emma asked, looking up from her textbook. I held the envelope, remembering the cold fury that had driven me to compile every piece of damaging evidence against Victoria. Financial records, witness statements, social media screenshots, enough ammunition to destroy her in court and ensure she never saw her children again. It's something from a long time ago, sweetheart. Something that turned out not to matter after all. Can I see it? I looked at my granddaughter, this poised young woman who had learned more about resilience and forgiveness than most adults ever do. Then I looked toward the living room, where Victoria was helping Michael with his physical therapy exercises, the two of them working together with a patience and dedication that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years ago. Actually, I think it's time to get rid of this. I walked to the fireplace and tossed the envelope onto the burning logs. Emma watched, curious but not concerned, as 5 years of carefully documented evidence turned to ash. "What was in there?" Jake asked from the counter. "Old papers about a fight that ended a long time ago." "Did you win the fight?" I thought about his question as I watched the flames consume the evidence I had never needed to use. "We all won, buddy. We all won." That weekend was Victoria's weekend, to have the children overnight at her apartment, a privilege she had earned back gradually over 3 years of consistent, reliable presence in their lives. As I watched her pack their overnight bags with the same careful attention she now brought to everything involving Emma and Jake, I marveled at how much all of us had changed. "Are you sure you don't mind keeping them an extra night?" she asked. "I know it's not our usual arrangement, but Emma has that science fair project due Monday, and I thought we could work on it together. Victoria, you don't have to ask permission to spend extra time with your children. They're your children too." She smiled, and for a moment I saw not the woman who had abandoned her family, but the mother she had fought to become. "Sometimes I still can't believe you forgave me." "I didn't forgive you, Victoria. I accepted you. There's a difference." That evening, as I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and the peaceful quiet of an empty house, my phone rang. It was Margaret Sullivan, now 82, and officially retired, but still checking in on the cases that had mattered most to her. "How are those babies doing?" she asked. "They're not babies anymore, Margaret. Emma's 13 and thinks she knows everything. Jake's 10 and actually might know everything, at least about baseball. And the parents? The parents are doing the work. All of them. Every single day. Any regrets about how it all turned out?" I looked toward the house where 2 children had found safety when their world fell apart, where a broken family had rebuilt itself into something stronger and more flexible than what came before. "Margaret, do you remember that envelope you helped me put together? All that evidence against Victoria? The one you never had to use? I burned it tonight." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Good for you, honey. The best victories are the ones where nobody has to be destroyed." As I hung up the phone, I realized that the story I thought I was living 5 years ago, the story of a grandmother fighting to protect her grandchildren from their unfit mother, had actually been something entirely different. It had been the story of a family learning that love doesn't always look like what we expect, that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones fighting the hardest battles we can't see. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to build something better from the pieces that remain. Emma and Jake are teenagers now, confident and secure in the knowledge that they are loved by multiple adults who have learned to put their needs first. Victoria is the mother she fought to become, present and stable and deeply committed to being better than she was. Michael is the father his limitations allow him to be, loving and involved and proud of the children who light up when he walks into a room. And I am the grandmother who discovered that sometimes the greatest gift you can give a child is not just your love, but your willingness to fight for what they need, even when that fight changes you in ways you never expected. The envelope that would have destroyed Victoria's rights as a mother became irrelevant the day she chose to put her children's needs ahead of her own desires. The evidence that could have won me a legal victory became unnecessary the moment we all chose to build something better than winning and losing. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about healing. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose love over law, understanding over evidence, and hope over fear. 5 years ago, I thought I was saving Emma and Jake from their mother. What I actually did was help their mother save herself. And in the process, I learned that families aren't just made by biology or law or circumstance. They're made by people who show up day after day and choose to love each other through whatever comes. The envelope that changed nothing turned out to change everything.